get in a little early just to make sure that the sound and video looks good. So I know Andy's in the house. If you can just let me know if you can hear me fine. All right, looks like. All right, Jenna's in the house. You're very welcome for doing this event. I'm very excited for it. I'm super excited. I assume you can hear me fine. All right, Andy sees me. Do you hear me? Because that'd be kind of awkward if you could see me but not hear me. All right, loud and clear. Awesome. A lot of people in the house. Love to see everybody here. All right, looks like we're about ready to get started. Give a few. Ooh, look at all those lovely, lovely people in the house. Love to see it. Okay, we're going to get started right at the hour, which is just a few moments away. Hello to everyone. I'll try my best to get through everybody, but we don't have a lot of time. All right, so let's see. I want a banana sticker. You in the wrong house. You want a banana sticker. You need to go see Dale L. Roberts if you want a banana sticker. Excellent, excellent. Looks like everybody can see me. Live streaming tech is in the house. Glad to see you here. All right, let's get started. So hello. I am super excited to be part of the 2022 Authortube Writing Conference. If that's why you're here, well, then you're in the right place. If you just happen to have stumbled upon us, well, then you're in luck because down in the description is a link to the entire 2022 Authortube Writing Conference playlist, easy for me to say. So you can go check out all the other amazing presenters after you watch this, of course. Now, if you haven't guessed it already, I am Keith Wheeler, and today we're going to be talking about self-published, traditional, and hybrid. Oh my, and kind of corny, I know, but catchy, right? Anyway, so who am I? I am a 5-time international #1 best-selling author, but more importantly, I've self-published hundreds of books. I've also been traditionally published, and therefore, I am currently a hybrid publishing author. Therefore, who better to talk the talk than someone who's walked the walk, right? And I promise I won't be this goofy the whole time, or I'll at least try not to be. Now, to be clear, I am not going to be trying to convince you that my way is the right way. My goal is by the end of this discussion that you'll have a better feel for the pros and cons of each of the publishing methods so you can have a more educated decision on which publishing path is best for you and your book or books. And don't worry, we will definitely make time at the end for a Q&A session. Now, if you're excited about this topic as much as I am, then I want you to give that thumbs up a smashy. It'll give you that nice warm fuzzy feeling inside. And with that, let's get started. So we're going to start off with traditional publishing. So traditional publishing, what is it? Well, traditional publishing is what everybody really thinks about typically when it comes to getting a publishing deal, a book deal. It's, there are publishing houses out there, traditional publishing houses out there that have a team behind them, and they pick out, quote unquote, the best of the best. And, many times you get an advance and things like that. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about traditionally published deals. So what are the pros of getting traditionally published? Well, first of all, you get that third-party gratification and approval. You get that sense that more than just you and your parents and your family and your friends like your book or like your concept of your book. We all want approval. And to get approval from basically a stranger, it's rewarding. It really is. And so that's one of the biggest pros that comes with a traditionally published deal. Another pro is exclusivity. Not everybody can get a deal. Not everybody can be traditionally published. And because of that, if you do get traditionally published, you can consider yourself being a little bit more high tier, or at least that's how it's looked at. You come with accolades. It gives you bragging rights, right? That you got a traditional publishing deal. They also have a team behind them, like I said before. So they have illustrators and editors and marketing directors, copywriting experts. And when I say copywriting, I don't mean like copywriting a book. I mean actually writing ad copy. So that's different. They also have a process and timelines. They've been doing this for years, decades, sometimes hundreds of years. And so they know precisely what the most efficient order to do things are, from concept to writing, illustrations, editing. They know which ones can be done concurrently and which ones have to be done, before the other ones. And so having somebody on your side that has that process down to a science, and they know what to expect and what's coming next even before you get to that part, that makes it super comforting knowing that you're not in it alone. And again, they have timelines. They're going to give you typically a schedule. They're expecting you to write between this day and this date, and this date it needs to go to the editor for the first drafts, and etc. So you have a bit of a structure set up already just by getting a traditionally published deal. Another pro that a lot of people think about when they think of traditionally published is you get an advance, right? You get money. They're going to pay you for your book. Well, that's going to depend on the size of the company. Will depend on, one, if you get an advance, and two, how much that advance is. Also, it takes into account the type of book and basically what they think they can sell in a year. That's typically what the advanced is based on. Another pro is that they're going to eat the cost of publishing. Now again, this does depend on the size of the publishing house. Sometimes they will, they'll cover most of it. Sometimes they'll be able to cover all of the publishing, again, depending on their size. And the biggest pro, or one of the many pros, is there's many times you can have cross promotions between authors of that same publisher that are in that same niche. So even if you don't know these authors, the publishing house or the marketing director there or somebody will organize, it could be, online book fairs with other books and other authors that they represent. And so that's a huge plus that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to getting a traditionally published deal. But as with any kind of thing in life, if there's pros, yep, there are cons. And some of these cons are pretty big. The first one is, well, rejection letters suck. I'm not going to lie. No one wants to hear that their baby's ugly. And when it comes to trying to get a traditionally published deal, majority of the time, you're going to get dozens, if not more, rejection letters before you even get close to a maybe, let alone a yes. Now, yeah, there are unicorns out there that get that yes the first time out. And for them, more kudos to you. But majority of the time, you're going to get rejection letters. And so that's definitely a huge con that you need to know going in. You need to kind of get that thick skin right off the bat and don't take it personally. They're telling you no about your book, not about you, not saying anything about you as an author. Just that particular book, for whatever reason, doesn't fit with them, isn't what they're looking for. Similarly, contracts and fine print, they suck too. How long the contract is for is going to be in the fine print. What, the advance, if you get an advance, what it covers, how long it, what it represents, all of that. Again, that's all in the fine print. If you're considering a traditionally published deal, if you get offered something, my biggest suggestion would be get a lawyer that looks at that fine print for you, unless you already have some kind of legal background. And even then, I would still get a third party lawyer's input, because again, you can really get hung up on some fine print. You want to know how much of your actual product, how much of your book, how much of your characters you're actually giving to this publishing house, and for how long. Sometimes it's only 6 months, and then they're going to reassess things. Sometimes it's longer. So you really need to pay attention to the contracts and that fine print. Another con about traditionally published is you may need to change your story. We have a tendency to kind of fall in love with our works. I mean, we're creators, we're artists. arting, our art just happens to be using words, and to hear that you have to change things is kind of hard. You've grown to love these characters. You may have to completely, nix a character from your storyline, and that may be hard to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you actually have to agree with what they do, what they suggest. It'll be in your contract where, if certain requests that they make aren't met, then it might make it null and void. But, in the grand scheme of things, remember that you are the creator, you are the author. And in the end, it's your book, it's your name or your pen name that's going on it. And so just even if you get a traditionally published deal offer, don't think that that means that whatever changes they want you to make, you absolutely have to make them. You don't. Again, just make sure you stick to your guns, and if decide on what are things that are nice to have and what are things that are must-haves. But one thing to keep in mind is that as a publisher, they're thinking of the business side of things, which is really hard for many authors to do, is to think of that business side. Publishers know what sells and what doesn't, as well as they know what's going to sell in the future. They can make those predictions, which leads me to my next con. It is a slow process. You're not their only book. You're not their only author. And so it is not unheard of for someone to get a deal and have to wait a year or even longer before that book actually gets published. Even if you've got one that needs no changes, it's still, I haven't seen anything that's less than 6 months. So again, it's not as fast as other options that are out there. Another con is you have to use who they choose. When it comes to illustrators, editors, cover designers, like I said, they have a team, and even if they don't have them on staff, they have people that they're used to working with. And so you have a lot less control over who's illustrating your book, who's, editing it, and all the other aspects that go along with that. And with more hands in the pot, that leads to another con, which is lower royalties. In general, for a paperback version of your book, you'll probably get between 6 and 8% royalties. That's it. That's all you're going to get. Also, you're usually paid quarterly. If you know anything about self-publishing, which we'll talk about in a second, but majority of the time you get paid every 30 days, assuming you're making sales. Again, with traditionally published, it's typically going to be quarterly. And so you need to know that going in and set your expectations accordingly. Also, author copies cost more. An author copy of your book, so you can either just look at it, or you can, sell it or give it away as gifts. Typically, most contracts will give you 1, maybe 2 for free. And then after that, you have to pay. And it's going to cost you more than other, like if you're self-publishing, getting the author copies are cheaper, because with traditionally published deal, that publisher still needs to get their money. They still need to get their cut. And so what they do is they just take it off of the author copy. So an author copy that might cost me, if I was doing it self-publishing, $4, I might have to pay through a traditionally published deal for that same author copy. I may have to pay $6 or $7. So it's something, again, to keep in mind, especially if you plan on buying in bulk because you're doing, author visits or, doing craft shows or any of that other stuff. So make sure you definitely keep that in mind, that your author copies are going to cost you more. Also, getting back to the advances. Advances are not for free. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have when it comes to traditionally published deals. Your advance, it's really just a loan. What the publishing house does is they figure out how many copies of your book do they think they can sell in a given time. Typically, it's a year. And so they figure out what your royalties would be from that book for that year and for that many of copies. And that's what your advance is, if you get an advance. What that means is, until you meet that threshold, whether let's say it's 1,000 books they think they can sell, you're not going to see another penny. It's because you got an advance, you got it ahead of time. And so again, that's something you need to keep in mind. That's something that most people don't talk about when it comes to traditionally publishing deals. They talk about they've got a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 advance, but what they're not telling you is they're not making anything else from it until they sell however many books were predicted. Also, you may have to still pay for some of the things. What I was saying earlier is, one of the pros is that they're going to pay for everything, right? Well, again, it depends on the size of the traditional publishing house. There are small publishing houses that may not give out advances. There are small publishing houses that may require you to pay some of the other things, like typically illustrations. Now, you'll get it at a much discounted price, like maybe $10 a page, which is a great deal for illustrations. But again, it still has to come out of your pocket. So that's one thing to keep in mind, not just when you get a publishing deal, but look at the size of the publishing house. Again, all of this information should be in your contract, what you're expected to cover and what they're going to cover. Another thing that people think about when they think of traditionally publishing deals is if they get a traditional deal, that means that all they have to do is write. The traditional publishing house is going to do all the marketing and promotion, and that's not true. As an author, you are expected to market and promote your book. The first month, maybe 3 months, depending on the how popular your book is, they may throw some money at ads or whatever, but majority of the time it's going to come down to you, and you're still going to have to push it and promote it and do author visits or go on blog tours or whatever you need to do. And so that's something that a lot of people don't realize. They think that if they get a traditional deal, that means all they have to do is write books. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Also, one bad experience could ruin your future options. So, remember I said that if you get an advance, it's based on whatever they think they can sell. So if they think they can sell 1,000 copies of your book in a year and they give you that advance and your book doesn't sell, maybe you didn't do any marketing and promotion for it, and so they only sold the 12 copies that your family and friends bought, well, then the chances of you getting a traditional publishing deal again is going to be a lot lower, because they've already, because you don't have to pay that advance back. So they've already lost money on you once. Are they really going to want to take a chance again? And that's a really big business idea that they have to keep in mind is, from a business perspective, is this author that we've already put X amount of dollars into and not seen a return on investment, are they really worth taking another chance on? And really, it seems regardless of what size the publishing house is, because on a big publishing house, you're basically just going to be more of just a number. And so if your numbers don't add up, then they'll just move on. Similarly, if it's a smaller publishing house, they can't afford to take another chance. So if you do get a publishing deal, you really need to go back to that marketing and promotion as much as you can to make sure that they don't, that they see the value in working with you in the future. And the biggest con that comes with traditional publishing is there's some bad actors out there. Many times they're called vanity publishers. Now, I understand there are people out there that don't have either the time or the desire to publish their own book. And so they want to pay X amount of dollars and just let somebody else do it. They just want to be a published author. And I get that. But I will tell you this, you should never be asked to pay thousands of dollars to publish your book. It doesn't cost that much. And so, unfortunately, there are people out there that call themselves traditionally published house, but they're not. They're basically just self-publishing it for you. And so you need to make sure that you do your due diligence and you pay attention to do some research on the name of the publisher that's maybe giving you an offer. Looking and see what are they asking you to pay, because like I said, if it's I don't want to say a large amount because that's subjective, but if you're asked to pay thousands of dollars, that's not a traditional publishing house. That is that's a vanity publisher, and you need to know going in that if you decide to pay that, that's more than what you should have to pay. So again, it's completely up to you, but that's something to keep in mind. So next up is we're going to be talking about self-publishing. Now, self-publishing, what is it? It's where you're publishing it yourself. You're basically the publishing house. There are platforms out there, most of which are inexpensive, free majority of the time, that you can go on and do all the elements of a publishing house all yourself. So what are the pros? Well, it's super easy to get started nowadays. The information's out there, whether it's on my channel, on other channels. You can search the web, anything, and just how to self-publish, whatever your genre is, and majority of the time it's going to be free information. And like I said, you've got places like KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, Lulu, Barnes and Noble, Draft to Digital, Ingram Spark, all those places that you can publish your book on, and majority of the time it's going to be free. So that's one thing that has taking things that could have cost you money using like a vanity publisher. Again, it's completely free, and again, super easy to get started. Another pro is it's more popular and more accepted than it ever has been before. Big names like Margaret Atwood, James Patterson, and even Stephen King have self-published books before. And so, it's not some, only the worst authors publish their books themselves. That's not the case, not at all. And so it's more popular and more acceptable. And so, yeah, it's something you definitely want to consider. Another pro is you have full creative control. Remember, with a traditional publisher, you may have to change your characters. You may have to change your story. You don't have to with self-publishing. You can publish it the way you like it, the way you want it. Now, whether it's something that the readers are going to like, that's a whole nother story. But you have full creative control on what you do with it. You also control where you sell it. What platforms do you go on? Do you just go on, one platform? Do you just go on KDP, for example? Or do you go to Ingram Spark? Do you go to a place, a place like Draft to Digital, where they'll actually send it out to multiple platforms for you? Do you want to sell it in stores? Do you want to sell it in big name bookstores, independent bookstores? Do you want to have your own website? Again, you have complete control over all of this, and where it's selling, what it's selling at, what the selling price is. Within reason, you have complete control over that. You also set your own publishing schedule. Now, obviously, if you're working with illustrators or editors, you still have to take into consideration their timelines. But in general, you can take as long or as short of amount of time as possible to publish your book. You don't have to wait the year, 18 months or whatever, like you would with a traditional house, because your book is the only book you're publishing at this time. And so again, you have a lot more, you have all complete control of that. Obviously, you can get higher royalties. There's less people involved, less hands involved, so you get higher royalties, much higher than the 6 to 8% that I talked about with traditional publishing. Also, you don't have to share it with anyone, unless you set up some other options that I'll talk about in a second. But in general, you don't have to share your profits with anyone. So like with the traditional publishing deal, they're getting X amount of royalties, and then they're splitting that royalties between, the publishing house and everybody else. And that's why you only get 6 to 8%. But when you're the publishing house, when you're doing it yourself, then you get those direct royalties. One thing that's a huge pro when it comes to self-publishing is that there are plenty of groups and organizations that are out there of people who have done it before, have been doing it for years, and that are willing and able to help you answer questions. You've got places like Ally, which is the Alliance of Independent Authors. They have what they call watchdog list, where you can go on absolutely free, and they actually rate things, and you can't pay to be on that. You can't pay to get a good rating. And so you can see, for example, if you get a traditionally published offer, you can go onto Ally's watchdog list and see if that publisher is, put as caution on their watchdog list. Again, they're also their Facebook groups and other groups on other social media. I know I've got a couple of Facebook groups. I know Dale L. Roberts has some. I mean, there's tons of people out there that are willing to help you answer questions you have, and not make you feel crazy about asking them. And one of the biggest pros with self-publishing is you have complete flexibility. You can think outside the box. Now, remember I said before, that you don't have to share your royalties with anybody. Well, I've actually in the past thought outside the box, and I've made deals with an illustrator for one of my children's books where I paid them. They asked for X amount of dollars. Let's just say $300. They asked for $300. I told them I'd pay them $500, but what I would do is I would pay them half up front, and I would pay them the rest in 50-50 royalty share until they reached that $500 amount. I've done that with illustrators, with ghostwriters. I've done it with narrators for audiobooks. Now, majority of the time, if you go to somebody with that, they're going to think you're crazy and they're going to say no. But again, you have that flexibility to think outside the box, to look at what limitations you have and see what you can do to work around that. Again, with pros, there comes some cons, though there is a lot of information out there. That was one of the biggest pros. One of the biggest cons is that there's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of outdated information. There are a lot of people out there that were publishing back in 2014, 2015, and they're not publishing anymore, but their information is still out there. So one of the biggest things I suggest is don't just trust one person. Even if that's me, don't just come to my channel. Go to other people's channels, look up things online, do your due diligence, and ask the same question to multiple people and see what different answers you get. Because like I said, one thing that you definitely want, especially if something is an article or it's a YouTube video, you can see when it was posted. Then look and see when the last time they posted something. And so that'll let you know how active they really are. Because unfortunately, things that worked back in 2014, 2015, they don't work anymore. And some of them go against Amazon and other places' terms of service. And so you can completely intentionally account banned or completely closed down just by taking advice from somebody who's doing it anymore, or they're not doing it recently. So keep that in mind. Also, you have to either do or outsource everything: the writing, the editing, illustrating if you have illustrations, cover design, copywriting, marketing, promotion. All of that is up to you, whether you do it with your money and you hire out, or you do it with your time and you actually do each of those steps yourself. You're self-publishing. You're the publishing house. You have to get it all done. You also have to update everything. You have to update your bio every time you put out a new book. If you put in your bio that you've published 10 books, well, then when you publish that 11th one, you have to update it. You have to update your websites or whatever with your newest book, and make sure that the newest book in the series, that they're all linked together. If you have an Author Central page, which you absolutely should because it's completely free and it's on Amazon, you have to update that. Make sure that you accept your newest book that you've done. All those things updated, that's all your responsibility because you're the publishing house. Very closely related to that is all the expenses are on you. You have to pay for all those people that you're outsourcing to. So it's not, you don't have anybody covering that for you like you would with a traditional publishing house. One of the biggest downfalls I had, one of the biggest cons for me when I first started with self-publishing, is you have no one else holding you to a schedule. If you're prone to procrastination, self-publishing is a challenge because you need to put yourself on a schedule, or it's going to take you 5 or 6 years to write and publish that book. I've seen and talked to many people that have had that same thing happen to them where, oh, I'm still writing it. It's because we're artists, it's never going to be perfect. And so we need to keep that in mind, and we need to set ourselves with the schedule. Again, otherwise it's very easy to just procrastinate and keep putting it off. You may not know the most efficient process or pipeline. Again, especially if you're first starting out, you don't know, what things can be done simultaneously. If can I do this while I'm hiring somebody else to do this, or do I have to do one before the other? Those things, the processes and the pipelines, those are things that come with experience. The good thing is, like I said before, there are groups out there and organizations where you can ask people, hey, can I have someone doing the illustrations while I'm doing edits? Questions like that. And then people can help you out. So while it's still a con with self-publishing, again, you're not alone. So you have to be comfortable enough to ask those questions so you can learn. You ask them once and then you know it for all your future books. And the biggest con is you're not traditionally published. Unfortunately, there's still a stigma. There are still some big stores, like, for example, Barnes & Noble, that will only book an author visit with someone who has a traditionally published deal and who has an agent. I know my local Barnes & Noble is that way. Other Barnes & Nobles aren't. So it's a store-by-store basis. So you have to call and check. But unfortunately, there are still some, as popular as it is now, and it's more popular than ever before, there are still some areas where it's looked a little bit more down upon than being traditionally published. So again, you want to keep that in mind. Okay, so we've talked about traditionally published. We've talked about self-published. So it's only a matter of time before we had to get to this, which is hybrid publishing. So what is hybrid publishing? You probably already figured it out. It's a mixture of the two. It's actually not really a publishing method as much as a type of author, because you're not going to publish the same book in traditionally published and self-published. But as an author, like I am, I have some books that are traditionally published, and I have some books that are self-published. And so that's what I mean when I say hybrid publishing. So it's a little bit of both. It's a mixture of both. So what are the pros? Is you get to learn from the pros. You get to learn from the traditionally publishing company about pipelines and about the process and about what things can be done at the same time and things like that. Also, if you already had a traditional publishing deal and then you decide to self-publish a book, so that's when you're starting your hybrid publishing, you gain the contacts that you had from your traditional publishing deal. So when I got my traditional deal, I did author visits, I spoke with the press, I had a blog tour. Well, all of these people that I talked to with my original book, with my traditional book, I now have a rapport with and a relationship with, so I can contact them with my self-published book, and it's no longer a cold call. It's somebody that's already familiar with you, somebody that's already worked you. And so it's a lot easier to get those yeses when you already have, worked with them in the past. You can also ride the popularity and ride the wave of your traditional publishing deal. Many of us know about a book having a BSR, a bestseller rank on Amazon. And what that is that's the rank of how that book is doing, selling in popularity. But what many people don't know is there's also an author ranking. And that is what you as an author, or your author pen name, how it's doing in the marketplace. So as you get more and more books out, that your author ranking can continue to go up or go down. And so you can ride the wave of the popularity of your traditionally published book, and when you self-publish a book, it will, because your author ranking is already up here, instead of starting at the bottom again, you're already going to be starting higher. You'll be starting somewhere in between. And so that's something that you can absolutely do and ride those waves and those ebbs and flows. So it starts where you started out with your trad deal, or vice versa if you were self-publishing first. So you can ride the waves with that. But also, if your book that was traditionally published, if it has some popularity to it, you can use that same popularity and maybe take some of the characters from there that by looking at your reviews, your readers really enjoy, and maybe do some spin-off books. One popular thing to do nowadays is to write a spin-off book from the perspective of either the side characters or the antagonist, the villain, if you will. And so people really like to read that aspect, that view. So that's something you can do, and you already have proven that people are interested in it because your traditionally published book did well. You can also use the schedule from your traditional publishing deal from that book to help plan out your self-published book. So for example, like I said before with traditionally published, if your book is currently in a traditional publishing deal, you probably will you'll get a schedule, and it may tell you that your first draft has to go to your editor on the 20th, and they're going to be done with it on the 30th. Well, that tells you that you have a 10-day window that you can start outlining or writing your next book that you're going to self-publish. And so you can use the schedule that they have set up on your traditional publishing deal to fill in the gaps of what you're going to do with your self-published book. And again, one of the cons with self-publishing is procrastination and not being on a schedule. This hybrid is a great way to use the from your traditional publishing deal and mimic that and make it work with your self-published book and help you to kind of stay on track. And if you're not doing a book at that same time, you can still take the timeline that they've created and give yourself an idea that is reasonable for when you're self-publishing. You can also use the higher royalties from your self-published book, as well as the fact that you're, assuming you're getting sales, you're getting paid monthly, to counterbalance the lower quarterly royalties you're getting from the trad deal. And finally, you can use your self-publishing to test out new genres, new pen names, new ideas, and self-publish them, promote them just like you normally would. And then you can come back with your traditional publisher with actual data to show that this new idea you have is selling. And that gives you a much better chance of getting future traditional publishing deals. Now, along with those pros, obviously, there's going to be some cons. And these cons are definitely not something to shy away of. And I can't make light of them. The big one of them is there's way more to juggle. You know, you have to stay organized. That's probably the biggest generalization I can make with these cons is you have to stay organized. You know, you have to keep track of what books are traditionally published, which books are self-published, what money's coming in from the trad books, which ones are coming, how much is coming in from the self-published books. Also, most traditional publishers want first dibs or first options when it comes to future books that you write, especially if they're related to the book that they've already published. So remember, I said before, as a pro, is you might be able to ride the waves and write some spinoffs that from the one that you traditionally published. Again, going back to the contract, in your contract, it may say that they want first dibs to before you self-publish. Now, many times, even if they have that clause in there that they want first options, is what they usually tell it. It was what they usually call it, or options to refuse. Typically, it doesn't include self-publishing. It just means they don't want you to go to a different publishing house before they have a chance to say yay or nay to it. But again, look at your contract and make sure that if it's not specified in there, just ask. But that's definitely a con that you need to keep in mind. Also, you have to work with the trad publishing house on book placements. So if they have an author website for you, are you allowed to put your self-published books on that website? Or do you have, can you only have your books that they've published for you on that website? So that can cause some confusion for readers. So you want to make sure that you understand that and discuss with them what the plan is and what needs to be done. And if they do allow you to do it, whose job is it to update it when you self-publish the next book? Also related to that is that you, like with self-publishing, you have to update all of your sites, all of your content. So your Author Central page, again, you absolutely should have one. If you don't, your website, whatever the traditional publishing house hasn't set up for you, everything else that you have to update. So you have to keep that in mind. Keep in mind that if you're self-publishing and traditionally publishing the same type of work, that it is imperative that those books look cohesive. Your viewers, your readers should not be able to look at that and know, oh, that's traditionally published or that's self-published, or even to know that there's a difference. So if you have a book that's traditionally published and you want to do one that's similar, and this is all assuming you're using the same author name, because if you're using a different author name, then that doesn't matter. But assuming you're using the same name, even if it's not in a series, if it's still in the same genre, you still want the covers to look similar as far as the font type, because it's all about branding. And so when you self-publish something, whoever you hire to do the cover design, they need to see your other traditionally published books and keep some continuity there. Make sure that, again, the font type, the color scheme, anything that you're using for branding is cohesive and is seamless when it comes to flowing from one book to the other. Also, when I was talking before about your author ranking, your traditionally published and self-published books can bring each other down. One could bring the other one down. So, which leads directly into my next con, which is you have to make sure that you give equal promotional attention to your traditionally published book and your self-published books. It's very easy when you get a traditional deal, again, to rely too much on that publishing house and think that they're going to be doing all this promotion. And if you trust in that and you don't put in, the same amount of efforts personally on your trad book as you do to your self-published book, then your author ranking can tank. One could make the other one tank. So you need to make sure that you make a conscious effort to give equal promotional attention. And the final con to hybrid really goes back to what I said at the beginning of the cons, which is you have to stay organized, because if it's not well tracked, your ads from your traditional publishing book could bring down and could eat into the profits of your self-published profits, and vice versa. I just said trad because usually with lower, only getting paid quarterly and with lower royalties, typically, at least from my experience, you're going to make more with the self-published books, assuming that you use equal amount of promotion and everything else. So it really comes down to organization if you want to do the hybrid approach. What I do is I don't do mine by book as much as I do by series, because I don't care if one of my books is losing money as long as the series isn't, because of read through. And so I have an Excel spreadsheet where I just keep track of how much is coming in every month. When it comes to the traditional publishing deal, obviously I'm getting paid quarterly, so I break that down by month, and then how much I'm spending on my ads, whether it's Amazon ads or it's Facebook ads or any other kind of marketing and promotion that I do. If it's costing me money, I make sure that I track it. And again, it's imperative that you stay organized, or can very quickly get overwhelming. So now with that, let's jump into, get some ready for some live Q&A. Now, I will do my best to answer everyone's questions, but if I missed your question or you're watching this on the replay, then feel free to drop your question down in the comments of the video, and I promise I read and answer each comment that I receive. Also, down in the description, there are links to the two main playlists that AWC, the Authortube Writing Conference, set aside. One is based on publishing and one's based on writing. Those links are down there. And also, the AWC is doing a giveaway, which I just learned out about just a couple of days ago. And they have over 20 prizes that they're giving away. If you want to enter, there's a link, you guessed it, down in the description. It's labeled AWC feedback form. And for each form that you fill out, including your name and email, you get an entry to win. Now, let's get over to those questions. Hopefully, I don't miss any. There are so many people in the house loving it, loving it, loving it. And if you liked this and you haven't already, give that thumbs up a smashy smashy. It gives me that nice warm fuzzy feeling I told you about. Okay, so I'm actually going to start at the top, which is going to take a while. Let's see if I can get some questions. Okay. If you don't like contracts and legalese, then don't go into those meetings alone. Absolutely. Absolutely. Here, I'll actually, that's worth, oh, it just jumped on me. All right. So first of all, we've got rejection letters are great. Stop jumping around. Okay. So we've got, I'm not sure if I'll ever go trad. They're jumping around. Okay. Okay. I enjoy self-publishing. Because I have control. That's absolutely true. I think if you like contracts and legalese, yeah, you should definitely have a professional with you. I couldn't agree more. I don't mind cutting. Okay. All right. So we're going to scroll back to the top. Okay. Oh, good point. Swapping to my phone. Okay. Let's see. I never realized what a control freak I was until I chose self-publishing. Absolutely. Could not agree more. Yeah, it's crazy, but it's absolutely worth it. Yeah, here's a good one. And most people didn't. I didn't know that about author copies. Yeah, author copies you definitely have to pay more for. And like I said, I mean, obviously each deal is going to be different, but it's definitely not it's not insignificant amount. I mean, sometimes it's doubled. Now with the trad deals that I've worked with in the past, usually they'll have, like, especially around the holidays, they'll have deals. But again, they're deals that they have, and then they say you have to order 50 copies. So again, it's not inexpensive. There you go, dropping the inside traditional publishing lingo and information. Yeah, well, and to be honest, one of the main reasons why I did get I decided to do the traditional publishing deal is because I really did weigh out the pros and cons. Is I wanted to be able to speak firsthand on both aspects of it, instead of, there are a lot of times people will just speak hypothetically based on research that they have or that they've done. But to be able to speak firsthand just gives me, in my opinion, just makes me feel better about it. Again, I can only speak towards my experience with traditional publishing. Yep. Excellent point. Yeah. Always thought traditionally published authors get an advance. Yeah, that's definitely not the case, unfortunately. Let's see. Any questions in here? I might actually start from the bottom, because I want to make sure I get all the questions answered that I need to, or that come through. Again, if I miss it, I apologize. You might want to drop it again. Question. Oh, I love people putting question and cues. And, oh, that's lovely. Question. If your goal is to make a film, a video game, media empire in general from your fantasy series, which route do you recommend? It's funny because unfortunately, there's really no one right way to do it. Because there are, just like with books, there are self-published films, self-published video games, self-published, pretty much everything at this point. I mean, you can self-publish a board game if you wanted to. And so, if you'll have more experience behind you, like I said, with a traditional publishing house. But that said, one of the biggest things is it really comes down to what you are willing to do yourself and what kind of timeline you're on. Understand that getting a traditional publisher to even look at your work is going to be, is going to take time. Some of them require you to have an agent first, and then you got to find an agent that's going to accept you. Then go to a trad publisher. Many times it's faster to get the ball rolling in something like that with self-publishing. Unfortunately, because you don't have a team behind you, that means you're doing it all yourself. So you have to make all the phone calls. You have to do all the research to find out, if I'm going to go out, and try to get a TV deal or a movie deal, who should I reach out to? You're probably not going to want to reach out to Steven Spielberg. You're going to try to find out who in your in that niche is more indie to start out with, and go from there. Great question, though. Can I talk about pricing? Well, I when I'm not quite sure what the question is about, but or what it is, but about pricing when it comes to how to price your book. A little off topic, but how to price your book if you're self-publishing is very easy. I suggest you go onto Amazon or whatever platform is your biggest platform that you plan on selling on, going in incognito mode, looking up your particular niche, finding the top 10 or 20 books that are selling, and see what they're charging, see what their page count is, and then use that as a base. You don't want to be the cheapest book out there. If you're the cheapest book out, unfortunately, majority of the time, people look at that as thinking it's inferior. But you also don't want to be the most expensive, because that's going to eat into your profits, because you're going to get less sales. So you want to kind of be somewhere in the middle. I typically try to be somewhere in just above the average. Also, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to pricing is you can always change your pricing when you're self-publishing. When you're getting a traditional publishing deal, then majority of the time they're going to tell you what it's going to be. They have experience. Majority of the time you're not going to get a traditional publishing deal on your children's book from a traditional publishing house that has never published children's books. They all specialize. So because you'd get a deal with someone who's familiar with that niche, they know what the best price is going to be. Great example is the book that I had traditionally published. I had it up for $9.99. They sell it for $12.95, being traditionally published. So again, higher than what I would charge, but it's fine because I still make less per copy. I hope that answers your question. If not, Tom, if you want to just clarify your question about pricing that you have, and I'll do my best to help it out or to answer it. Okay, let's see. Looks like that's a question for Tom. Okay, so we have, can you please recommend a good book cover designer? I can. I actually, assuming you're not afraid of using Fiverr, and I know there are people that don't use Fiverr, but Olivia Pro Design on Fiverr, and I can, if you want to just, you can just email me at kwheelerbooks@gmail.com if you don't want to look it up. But it's Olivia Pro Design on Fiverr. Does amazing work. I know I'm not the only one that uses her. I know so many people that use her, and she's very well-rounded. Whether it's doing a cover for nonfiction, fiction, sci-fi. I mean, I've seen her do amazing covers for so many different genres. But yeah, Olivia Pro Design. Are there self-publishing schedule templates out there for people that are absolute beginners like me and don't know where to start in making your own schedule? I don't know. I mean, there might. I mean, it seems like nowadays there's one for everything. I mean, shoot, Dale L. Roberts might have one. He's got quite a few templates and checklists out there. I don't have one, but really, it's kind of hard to. It's a lot easier when it comes to creating it yourself, because you know how long it's going to take you to write. It's also going to depend on the type of book you're writing. Obviously, it's going to take longer if you're writing an epic novel than if you're writing a picture book. So it's kind of hard to really have a template, in my opinion. And then the same thing goes for pretty much every aspect of it, with the exception of maybe the cover design. You know, the editor obviously is going to take longer depending on the number of words they have to edit, the number of rounds they have to edit, the topic of it. You know, it might, you know, if you're doing something nonfiction and there's a lot more references that need to be double checked and things like that, that's going to take longer. So it's unfortunately, I mean, if there is a template out there, I don't know of it. And again, I find it, and I understand, you know, starting out, you get very overwhelmed. But also, if you're just starting out, I would worry less about having a strict schedule. The biggest thing I would just focus on is set aside time, figure out when you can work on it. You know, is it something that you can work on for 30 minutes every day? Is it something you can only work on one day a week, one day a month, whatever? Figure out what's reasonable for you, and then sit down with your calendar and say, okay, if I know that I can set aside 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and it's going to take me, a month to write it, then put that on your schedule and stick to it. That's the big thing, is put it on your schedule and stick to it. And I understand things come up, and you might not be able to, you're supposed to work on for 30 minutes at the end of the day on Friday, and you have something come up. Great. Then you're going to do it on Saturday. You didn't normally work on a Saturday, but you didn't make it on Friday. So you make up for it. So it's really just holding yourself accountable. Okay. Which publishers do you recommend uploading your self-published book to? Kobo, Ingram Spark. Okay. So if you're just starting out, I always suggest starting out with KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. It's the most, what I find the easiest, the most user-friendly interface. And it's completely free to use, assuming you don't want to buy your own ISBN. And so that's usually what I suggest starting with. If you're one of those people that don't want your book on Amazon, which I completely respect, then obviously you don't want to do it through KDP. I would use Ingram Spark is a great option. Go into it knowing that there are going to be some expenses that go along with it. But yeah, Ingram Spark is amazing, and they do list in the catalog for that most bookstores use, so it does better your chances. They also have the option for you to set a wholesale price, and they also have the option, which is a huge deal, that you can accept returns. I don't want to get too off topic, but a lot of people think that the reason why you can't get your book in a bookstore is because KDP, you're using a free KDP ISBN. That's not the case. It's because Ingram Spark allows for returns, and bookstores need to know that they can return their book. So unfortunately, I didn't get to nearly as many questions as I wanted to. I tried to get a couple more, but I also want to be respectful of the next presenter, because they're amazing presenters pretty much the whole entire time. So I actually want to catch quite a few of them. So let's see if I can do one more. Let's see. Thank you. I love all that. Super excited. Again, I will, if you have a question that I did not answer, make sure that you drop it in the comments after this video, and we will, I will go through them and I will answer each and every one of them, I promise, unless I don't see it. Okay, this is a great one. I think I just covered that, but is it true that bookstores or book distributors will not carry print-on-demand books? No, that is not true. I have my books in over 20 bookstores, even in states I've never even been in. And so it's absolutely possible. It takes a little bit more work. But again, it mainly comes down to, are you going to be willing as an author to accept return books? And that's one of the big things. But yes, you absolutely can get books that are published through print on demand. You can absolutely get them in bookstores. That was a good question. Okay, folks, any more questions? Please drop them. Yeah, look at that. Andy's already all over it. Okay, so as we start to wind down, I don't want you to let the fun stop here. There are even more amazing presentations going on with the 2022 Authortube Writing Conference. I want to give best of luck to everyone with your books, as well as the contest if you do the contest. And I hope I've helped you better decide which publishing path is best for you and your books. Because remember, you can do each book differently. It all comes down to what you're looking for. And now I actually got some presentations I got to watch. So again, I wish the best of luck to everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday.